All right, Jen, welcome to the Basketball Performance Podcast. Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate your time.
Appreciate you, Will. I'm excited. I know Coach B, Quinnipiac strength and conditioning coach, told me he had a great time with you a couple weeks ago. So I'm ready to go.
Definitely. Just before we go through the questions, can you just give us a little bit of background on yourself? How did you get into hoops, where you're from, and then how did you end up in coaching?
Yeah, so I've been playing since I can remember. Pretty much, my dad played. He's 6'5". He played in college. My mom is actually from St. Vincent in the Barbados, and she played a little bit of netball. I wasn't familiar with that was, but she told me it's a combination of like basketball and volleyball. So she's got some athleticism. So fortunately, I guess they passed a little bit of a little bit of it along to me. And I played multiple sports growing up, though. Played basketball, softball, soccer, pretty much everything. Was often in the schoolyard with the boys playing football too, hockey. So just kind of was an athlete growing up, and ended up growing up in Long Island, and then ended up transferring though to play high school basketball at a school in Brooklyn, Nazareth Regional Academy. And we had a really good team there. We, had pretty much the entire roster was Division I talent and played in the Catholic High School League. So super competitive. And that's where I ended up getting recruited by a handful of D1 schools and choosing Quinnipiac at the end. So had a great career there. Couldn't ask for a better time. 4 years, did a lot of winning, made, a lot of great relationships, great coaches, and ended up wanting to stay in coaching. Didn't know I was going to coach, honestly, at all, until my fifth year came around, and I was kind of thinking about what I was going to do. I was on track for a secondary education degree. So I was doing a little student teaching, and one day one of our assistant coaches, Brian Wilson, came up to me and was like, "Hey, you should think about being a GA here next year. I'm sure Coach Fabry wouldn't mind like keeping you around, since I was going to be around for another year for a master's anyway." So, I kind of went into her office one day and was like, "Hey, can I help out next year?" The season hadn't really ended yet, but I kind of knew that was the closest thing to staying connected to the game was, coaching. So honestly, before college, I had really no desire. I wasn't ever like, "Oh my God, I'm going to be a coach right away." Teaching was kind of the path, and I knew that I'd probably coach like high school maybe, but college coaching at least was never really a goal of mine necessarily. But it's been unbelievable heading into year two. Couldn't, ask for a better situation in terms of being able to coach at my alma mater where I played, for the same staff that I played for. So coaching alongside Coach Fabry now after playing for her is a pretty cool experience, and the transition's been pretty seamless.
Really cool, really cool. And I'm interested about your experience playing high school in New York City in the
Yes.
Catholic League. So for anybody who doesn't know, New York City is one of the best basketball states in the country, and they have an amazing Catholic League, which is where Jen played at. Talk a little bit about your experience. How is it different from anywhere else you played, maybe any other state? How is it different from college? Just talk a little bit about that.
Right. So I grew up in Long Island in Nassau County, and the big sports there were more like lacrosse, soccer, and basketball. It just, at a certain point, it wasn't competitive enough for me to really continue to get better. I kind of felt like I had kind of maxed out all the teams that I was on there, and just needed, again, a more competitive environment if I was going to, play collegiately, and just needed some more exposure. So going to New York City was like shell shocking for me, though. At first, you get to the first outdoor league that you play in the summer, and just the level of basketball was unbelievable. You're playing, I go in as a freshman, and I'm on a team with juniors and seniors of girls that are getting recruited by Power 5 schools left and right. The style of play is so much different, in terms of just pick and roll basketball, being able to make a play off the bounce. It was just totally different, but in a good way for me, where I was really able to just learn how to play freely without play calls and sets. And it wasn't as organized, and it was more unstructured, which really, I think, benefited me when I got to the college level, because you got to be able to score the ball without a play call, in my opinion, eventually. So playing in New York City with a lot of talented players, I was able to kind of figure out what my role was on any given day, depending on who was on the court, right? If I was playing with 4 older girls, I wasn't going to be the one to get the ball and make the shot every single time, right? So I had to figure out kind of what role I served, depending on what team I was on, where the game was, and at what point in the game were we in terms of who was on the floor and who was hot. And I think playing in New York City, you kind of get that feel for basketball in terms of time and score, and who should be getting the shot and where should they be getting it.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think it helped your grit and mental toughness at all when going from like the New York City level and then into college? Talk a little bit about that, because for myself, I had experience playing on street ball in New York City as well during the off season at West Fourth and stuff like that. And so
yes, the West Fourth League. Yep.
Right. Yes,
that's
exactly.
So you know exactly what I mean, right? Like I would show up to games. And, I was on a team. Obviously, I played for Exodus New York City, which is now like one of the top teams for girls basketball in New York City. And at the time, they were really good too. But again, wasn't a Nike UIBL team, was totally grassroots. Like, everyone was taking the train to games, walking to games. Like now they're sponsored and they got these hoodies and they take planes everywhere. Like it wasn't like that. Yeah. So you know what it is to show up at a West Fourth League, and every game, I didn't know who was going to show up. I didn't even know half my teammates. Sometimes we were getting random people to just come play because we might've needed another body. Right. So talk about being able to adjust on the fly and not know necessarily the style of play of every single one of your teammates. Like you got to be able to figure it out. And we didn't have practices, so you weren't able to practice your plays every other day, right? Like, so it's, again, just building the feel of being able to just go out there and play. Yeah,
that's great. And just the mental toughness part. I mean, for me, I remember people are going to give it to you straight, like whether you can play or not. And if you make a mistake, people will let you know, right? And so building that anti-fragility for me, because being from this part of the world, it's not exactly as direct. Like people don't talk to you as direct. But for me, man, what an experience. And it really, really helped me in terms of my confidence, my mental toughness. But I mean, going off the subject of high school. So since is one of your main responsibilities to recruit at Quinnipiac, or like, is that one of your responsibilities you have?
Yep. So we're, our staff pretty much does a little bit of everything in terms of every coach kind of has the same responsibilities, just maybe for recruiting, we've kind of split it up by region. So we all recruit, but we all have like our own kind of state that we kind of break it up by in terms of recruiting, scouting. We kind of share the workload amongst the entire staff.
Great. And so if you could go back to your high school days, what's one of the things that you wish you would have known before going to college?
It would definitely be just moving off the ball and learning more off the ball reads. So I remember when I got to Quinnipiac my freshman year, that was probably the hardest thing for me, was learning off the ball movements, but the terminology that kind of goes along with it. So we were super motion based when I got to Quinnipiac. And again, coming from New York City, where it was pick and roll basketball. Like that's what I did. I set screens, I rolled, I pick and pop, like posted up. It wasn't as much off the ball movement in terms of like flare screens, down screens, making those kinds of reads. So for me, that was a big adjustment of not always screening on the ball, but screening off the ball. So in high school, I kind of wish I had a little bit more of a background of, if they go under the screen, you're popping back behind to shoot that thing. If they're chasing you on an off ball, like you're curling. So for my freshman year, I remember just the terminology of the chase, curl, pop, fade, flare, like all that kind of stuff was an adjustment to me, and definitely took me a little bit longer to understand in terms of our offense in a structured system. But then again, when we said we roll the balls out and we're playing 4-on-4, I was ready to go. But the organized and the terminology definitely took a little bit to get used to.
Yeah. And you kind of answered the question, but in terms of when you went to high school, what are some of the things that you feel like high school coaches can do to get their players ready to play at the next level?
I think it's film. And I think a lot of high school coaches are starting to get there though, but definitely like just recording your practices, like whether you have to set up an iPhone in the corner of the gym or an iPad, whatever you have, but recording every single practice and showing film. Like I think that going back and actually being able to watch what you're doing instead of, just having to try to recreate the situation or tell a player what they did wrong. If you can go back after practice and say, hey, this was really good, or hey, this wasn't so good, and they can actually see it, I think the learning curve is just, is going to be that much easier to get over. So definitely film for high school coaches would be number one. And again, that's how you're going to teach all those reads and stuff. I think using film is really good in terms of a one-on-one situation or a full team situation. That would be my biggest recommendation. And I know a lot of high school coaches are headed in that direction.
Nice. So again, if you could do this over again and take out the knowledge part, which, I mean, you can learn on your own, but it's a little bit tougher. You usually have to have a mentor. What's a skill? Because you go and recruit along with all the rest of your team. What's one skill that you see from high school players that you wish more high school players could have, whether it be footwork, whether it could be offhanded dribble, whether it could be finishing? What's one thing that you could give advice to a high school player who's getting ready or wants to be recruited at any level of college? What's one skill that you feel like maybe lacking a little bit in high school?
I definitely would go with, can I say two?
Yeah,
I'm going to go first. I'll go with, for guards, it's definitely footwork. And not just footwork, like attacking the basket, 1 foot, 2 foot jump stop, not that, but shooting footwork. So being able to shoot 1-2 or shooting off like a hop. So I know that there's always that argument of, oh, should you catch and shoot 1-2 or catch and shoot off the hop? But being able to shoot off screens, shooting off different angles, shooting while you're backpedaling, right? Did someone get a rebound and you have to relocate to the 3-point line? Can you get your hips around and get square? All of that footwork, I think at the high school level, that's where it's really ingrained in you. Because when you get to college, you're just so used to your habits. It's almost harder to break those. So I think if you're really working different sets of footwork, and again, you're able to use multiple sets and not just have to only shoot one way, you're going to be at a real advantage by the time that you get to college. Second thing, I think for post players, especially, and even bigger guards, is the ability to seal people up. So whether you set a screen and can you hold a seal and get a high-low position, understanding the angles of your screens, I think that that's really underrated. Because you can get yourself in a really good position to score the ball, right? If you know the defense is going under and you're able to take an angle of the screen where you're kind of screening their butt cheek, right, their lower half, so that they can't get underneath you and you can hold that seal, that's going to be giving you layups all day long. Same thing, if you know that the defense wants to go over the screen, right, you're going to take certain angles. So being able to hold screens, slip out of them, I think sealing for post players is a really big key, and it's kind of hard to teach. But once you start to understand it, and again, using film to show those angles, you're going to have a real good advantage, and you're going to create easy opportunities for scores and mismatches. Okay.
And so some of the traits of players are not quantifiable, like body language, like talking to their teammates, the way that they engagement, even if they're on the bench. If they're one of the starters and the coach calls them over to the bench, and the way that they react to that, or the way that, okay, they're on the bench now, how engaged they are with the game. What are some of the things that you see? Say you have a player that you really want to recruit in Connecticut, you go see them. Obviously the skill part, you can see the footwork, you can see the height, you can see the IQ, it's apparent, but what about those little things that, make up the entire player, and whether they're going to be a good fit for your culture? What are some of the things that you look at?
Yeah, it's funny because those little things end up being really big things. But yeah, you're definitely watching for that, right? Like if someone doesn't have a good game, how are they reacting after the game, right? Did their team won, but what's their body language look like? When they're not shooting the ball well, what does their body language look like? When they pick up 2 fouls in the first quarter and have to sit for the rest of the half, what does their body language look like? So those are all the little things that you're just trying to take note. When everything's going well, when their teammates not playing well, are they going up to them and trying to give them a little bit of confidence, right? So it's not even always about them. Are they able to communicate with their teammates during a free throw? Are they huddling up? There's so many little things. How are they interacting with their coach during timeouts? Are they, is there eye contact? Are they in the huddle? Are they engaged? Like you said, there's so many little things that end up being really big things that that's why I think it's important that you see kids when you're recruiting them. I've learned this, this is only year 2, obviously. So I've got a lot to learn, but I've already realized how important it is to see kids more than once. Because if you see their best game, okay, great. But I'd actually like to see a kid when they don't play well, because how do they act when they don't play well?
Right, definitely. And one of the things that I get from your social media is that you put a lot of work in by yourself, which is awesome. And it's definitely something that people need to do. in this day and age with social media, we can see, well, basically what's happening in Asia and what's happening in North America.
Right.
So we get an idea of what's going on. And more you see that basketball skill development is becoming an industry of its own, really, like even a little bit separate from basketball. For you, and especially for high school players, what's a good ratio that you would suggest between skill development and game repetitions? What would you say is a good balance? Because you obviously need a little bit of both.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what time of the year it is. Like, I think that that's actually really important. And, are you a kid that's playing the entire game of you, right? Like, it might be different for you. So if you're a starter that's playing, at its 8-minute quarters, I guess, right, to 32 minutes a game. But if you're playing the majority of the game, you're going to need to rest a little more in terms of you might not need all that contact outside of practice. So it might be more skill during the season. Whereas in the off season, I think it's skill, but you also want to make sure that you're not losing that game feel. So having a balance of both, I think, is super important. But if you're a kid that's maybe you're a sophomore and they put you on varsity and you're not getting that many minutes, I think that it's important that you're getting game-like actions and game-like drills outside of the game because you're not playing that much in the game. So as much as the answer is it depends, is not always a great answer. It really does depend because, again, it's the balance of the load management versus, just tightening up skills, depending on how much playing time that a kid is getting and, what's the goal of that player during the course of the season.
Right. And so you mentioned making drills more game-like. Can you give me examples of how someone can make their drills more game-like? And is it possible to add reaction and decision-making into those drills to make it a little bit more chaotic and random?
Yes. So that's actually like what I love to do. So, one of my favorite things to do at Quinnipiac is just get workouts in with our players, like the sweat equity piece. Like that's kind of what I've kind of prided myself on these last 2 years and just love being on the court. I love to jump into the drills. So, we don't have a ton of resources in terms of, we don't have a million bodies out there like a Power 5 school. We don't, but I can use myself. I jump in there all the time. I'm sweating by the time our workouts are over. But if we've got a couple managers out there or even our players, we might play some dummy defense on each other. But I love to do simulations. So, for example, it could be, let's say I've got a workout. It's me and 3 other players. Let's say it's me and 2 managers. So we've got 6 total people. We'll do a simulation. So it'll start 3-on-3 and we'll start in a different action. So let's say a middle pick and roll, right? So we go to middle pick and roll and we're driving the ball to the middle. We're going to play 3-on-3 out of that. So if we decide to kick out, it's totally random. If we kick it out and the wing shoots it, right, that person's off. As soon as that person's off, it goes to a 2-on-2. The next person that shoots it is off. It ends in a 1-on-1, high value 1-on-1. You get 5 seconds to score. Another example, we set it up 3-on-3 again. It's drive and kick. We've got a wing, a corner, and an opposite wing filled. We drive the ball baseline. We hit the drift pass. We make the extra pass to the wing. The player that shoots that shot is off. Now the play doesn't stop. That player gets their rebound, is off. Now we go to a 2-on-2 driving kick. So now the wing, we throw another ball out. So there's always 2 balls in the play. Coach has a ball. Throw the next ball out. We drive and kick, and it's 2-on-2, and we play. Right? If the defender helps off, we kick it. If she doesn't help, the kid with the ball goes and scores it. Whoever shoots is off. Now that last player gets the 1-on-1. And we'll, again, 5-second countdown. You don't have all day to make a move when it's 1-on-1. So right there, we're simulating end of shot clock, right? So I'll be counting down. I might be guarding them. It'll be right. I'll roll the ball out. 5, 4, 3, 2, right? And they got to get to the rim. They got to make a move. We'll score it to 11, right? Every missed shot is a point for the coach. If they score, they get a point. So we'll play to 11 and it makes it competitive. And again, you can do so many different situations out of that, whether it's, ball screen reads, just driving kick reads, post up reads, all of that. And it's fun and they love it because you just get to compete. And then again, the defense, you can kind of manipulate how hard we're going, right? So if it's 2 days before a game and this is our starters that are out there, 3 starters getting workouts in, we're not going to go 100% on defense. We'll probably go 70, 80% because, we're just trying to let them make decisions and get reads. If this is a summer workout, we might be going 100% really playing defense on them. So again, it's randomized though. None of those reads are scripted. If they drive, the defense is going to do something different every single time.
Right. And is that predetermined what they could do? So could they do anything, or is there like a myriad of maybe like 2 or 3 different options that they can do?
So we might start, right? Like maybe the first, if we, let's say we do that for 10 minutes, maybe the first 2 minutes, I'll say, all right, it's either going to be drive and kick and shoot, or drive and kick and drive it. Right. So that might be the first 2 minutes. But typically by the time, like, this is something that we'll do, like, they know it. I say we're going to play 3-2-1. They know exactly what we're talking about. So 3-2-1, we'll get into multiple reads out of it. And it'll be, again, totally random. So it just really depends on what the defense does.
Do you incorporate what your tactics that you guys run in particular in order to pair it with your skill work to make it a little bit more specific, or is it just general in a sense where it might kind of be open?
During the season, we'll definitely try and incorporate, skills. So let's say, we run a decent amount of horns action. So we'll play that 3-2-1 out of a horns action, right? So we might have a horns, the ball side post rolls, the weak side post lifts. So we'll play out of that. So now you're 3-on-3, right? So we might have guards in there too. I'll definitely, we're pretty versatile. So we'll throw a guard in the post spot, and everyone's got to be able to play every position. So we'll throw it back to the guard. If the guard's got a shot on the pop, she'll shoot it. And then we'll get into a middle ball screen 2-on-2, right? And then the next kid scores, and then the post up, maybe the 1-on-1, we'll move that into the post. So instead of the 1-on-1 always starting on the perimeter, we'll post the kid 1-on-1 with the 5-second countdown on the block. So now you've got to score from the block. So again, totally random actions, but we can kind of manipulate how we start that 3-on-3.
Nice. And the way that the modern game is going is it's much more free flow, much more 5-out in a sense. Well, not always 5-out, but it's much more free flow and conceptual. Do you feel like, at least in your league and the league and the other teams, or your team and the other teams that you guys play against, is it in fact headed that way? What's your opinion on that?
I don't know. I still see in our league a ton of like spread ball screen, ball screen continuity, a ton of that. Like there's a couple teams in our league, like Maris is one of them that plays, the kind more of like a 4-out 1-in, but a motion style off ball screening. But a lot of the teams have gone to the Princeton style though. I think we've guarded in almost every scout chin, like the chin actions. So that's what I've seen across the MAC, which is our league, is a ton of that. So yeah, 4-out 1-in, but not too much 5-out. Like almost every team in our league is still playing with a true post player. Maybe not planted on the block, but in that high post, block to block. We still do have a traditional 5 on every single team. Right.
Cool. And now switching gears a little bit, just to more of the international game. Do you feel like, do you take note of what's going on in Europe and South America, Asia, Australia at all? And if so, do you think that it's slowly making, like, players from over there slowly making their way into the States? Because obviously in the NBA and the WNBA, there are a ton of foreign players now. But is there any kind of foreign influence on the American game today?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you said that, because it was during the COVID summer pretty much where, everyone was on lockdown. I actually did a kind of a deep dive into finally getting to watch some FIBA and some EuroLeague women's basketball. And I was amazed. Like I'll be the first to say I knew absolutely nothing about European game prior to that year. Like, I just watched, and I'm a basketball junkie. Like all I watched was women's college, men's college, NBA. And I was missing out on some really quality basketball over there in Europe. So we've also had at Quinnipiac, a couple of my teammates have been international players, and the way that they play so hard and so unselfish. And those are the two things that I've really taken away from my experience playing with international players and watching that. So slowly, I do think it's starting to come over. You'll see it with all the false action, especially in the men's game more so. All the handoffs and screening actions that kind of just lead up to the actual action that you want to see in Europe. So that's definitely making its way over to the men's side, and it's slowly getting there to the women's side.
Yeah, I think watching the Olympics this year, I mean, Japan obviously shows what Asia is capable of, and it's just the beginning for them because they run their styles so well. And so I'm just curious, going off the international subject, there is a lot of listeners who are great girls basketball players right now. They're probably still in high school. When you're looking at an international player, what are some of the factors that you think about as a coach? And what are some of the things that the international player has to do proactively to get the attention of someone like you?
Yeah, so this is a question that I actually asked Paula Strautmane, who is from Latvia, and she played for the Latvian national team, and then ended up, that's how she pretty much got to Quinnipiac. And I've asked her that. I'm like, what advice would you give when I had her on my podcast to younger players who are, internationally that want to get seen? It's not easy, right? But her number one piece of advice, because for me answering this, I don't have that perspective. So for asking her was I was getting the truth be told there in terms of it was being on the national team. She said that being on your country's national team is mostly the X factor to being noticed or having an opportunity to be noticed by American coaches and American universities. So working your way up, because I know that you go through tons of tryouts depending on the country. And obviously your country has to be good enough to qualify for a lot of those tournaments, which I know is the tough part. But your step number one your goal should be to get onto that national team.
Very cool. Very cool. Very good advice. Very good.
And I'm glad you brought up Japan, because I absolutely loved watching them this past year. So in the Olympics, they were unbelievable. The five out that they play, their style, all the cutting, that definitely left an imprint on me for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously physically, like when you watch that last game, you can't really compare the two teams. But what I found unbelievably inspiring is how they went against the Giants for the first time and were able to put up a decent fight for a lot of the game, and able to play significantly undersized, but to use their strengths, which is speed. I would say high basketball level IQ, and most Asian countries can really shoot the ball at like at a high.
That was the difference. Yeah.
High clip. So, I mean, that's one of the things that like I took away as well. And like, it was a proud, even it wasn't my country, it was a proud moment, because very rarely would you see an Asian team go all the way and play against the US in the gold medal round.
Yeah. And I read too, and I listened to a couple podcasts with Tom, I don't know how you say his last name, Havasi.
Yes, the Japanese coach, who's now the men's coach.
Yeah, now he's left. Yeah, going to the men's team. I'm sure they're sad about that, but their work ethic is what I kept coming back to from reading about them and listening to different things on them. Is apparently they had like 3 separate practices every day. They trained like maniacs, is what I heard. So I think they put in enough work to earn that medal. So
right, work ethic definitely usually not the issue there.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I heard you talking about in another podcast is being proactive as trying to get recruited, but also being persistent and having perseverance. How does someone go about being, I don't want to use the word aggressive, but being persistent with a coach without coming across as too intruding?
Yeah, I think I think you have to be realistic. I think that's the first thing. Like, you've got to be realistic with yourself. And I think that's where a lot of kids get in trouble. And that's where it comes off as intruding. You got to be self-aware of your skill set. What level do you think you can play at? And sometimes maybe you really don't know. And that's when you got to ask the coaches around you, though. Right. And that's where you got to have some truth tellers too. Like, there's kids, their parents like, oh, you're going to UConn. Like, you're not going to UConn. Like, you got to be realistic. So I think that's step number one, is to really find out, all right, what level can I compete at? And you might have to do some homework there to figure that out. Like, if you're not willing to spend the time to watch the games of the teams and the conferences that you want to go to, right? If I'm sitting in high school, right, and I'm watching, UConn play as a high school kid, I'm like, I'm a little too slow probably. And I'm not trying to be negative, right, or crush my dreams, but like, I probably can't play at that level if I want to get significant minutes, right? So being realistic is also going to help your chances, because now you're able to kind of say, all right, I think my skill set can fit this school because I've done my homework and I know how they play. If I'm a 3-point shooter, I'm looking at a conference and I'm saying, all right, this team shoots a lot of threes. I think I could fit in well skill set wise, right? Or I'm a post player and I play back to the basket. Ooh, this team's got a handful of post players who they seem to play through. I think this could be a good fit for me. So I think just being self-aware is the first step, and then being smart with your emails and sending out highlight tapes right? But making sure that all the information that you want a coach to see is there, so we don't have to go back and forth with you. So if I'm sending an email, I would make sure it's personalized, make sure you seem like you know something about the school. But the third thing is, it can't be too long. I don't want to read an entire paragraph, and I appreciate it. And sometimes I do. Like, I'm sitting there in the morning, I'll go through. But if I see something right in the subject line of, 6-foot wing, state class, whatever, and the first thing is, here's my highlight, and then below it is 3 full game links. Because if I go and I click a highlight, which I do, I go through and I watch almost every single kid that's sent to me, I'll click a highlight link. Right? If I'm interested in the highlight, then my next thing is, okay, I need to get full game film. And if it's not already there, oftentimes like something comes up in the day where I meant to email back and ask for that full game film, but I totally forgot, or, maybe it took another day or two to get back. But if that full game film's right there, then I don't have to go chasing after you, and we don't have to be in a back and forth conversation without having the information. So it just makes it a lot easier if you already state everything that you're interested in, a little bit about us, and, you send all the resources necessary right away. Sorry.
Right. So what you're suggesting is in the email, highlight film and full game. So we don't have to go back. And in a
subject line, you should be as descriptive as possible, even in the subject.
Nice. Very, very, very useful information. Okay. So say, for example, I'm now in Australia. Say I'm in Australia. It's a COVID year. I want to come over to Connecticut, but I cannot make your acquaintance personally, right? I'm just right. Putting this out there as a hypothetical. Would it even be possible to play for a MAC school or a Patriot League school or a CAA school? Like, since you're not able to see me in person, which I completely understand as a coach, I would definitely want to see the player in person. Like, does that significantly decrease my chances? Say I play for the national team, I'm everything that you want. I can stroke the 3-pointer at 40% clip. I'm 6 foot, right. Like all the necessaries. Would it make it significantly harder to be recruited by a D1 school or any type of school for that matter?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully before COVID, you were already kind of communicating. So maybe there was a chance to get seen at an earlier age. But if not, I mean, it definitely makes it harder. But I think a lot of college coaches in the last year or two sometimes had to go off of film. And as much as you didn't want to, you didn't really have a choice for the recent classes. So I think that you can definitely get that connection started through film, but eventually right now that things are starting to clear up, hopefully you'd be able to make that trip over, we'd be able to get over and see you. So it's definitely going to make it harder. But then the other thing is, if you have a good connection with a coach or, just somebody that can advocate for you in the States, if I know somebody, right, maybe a former coach of mine that has a connection to this kid in Australia, and I can trust this coach and I really know him, and they're able to communicate with that kid over there, then I'm going to be more likely to trust his word as opposed to just watching the film, right? So on top of, okay, I really like this kid on film, but I'm not sure because I haven't seen her in person. If you're able to have a connection with an agent or whoever it is, the people that advocate for all the European players that, we get emails and stuff, someone that we trust, then we're more likely, we're going to be more likely to really take that prospect seriously, because we're not just communicating with the kid. We also have somebody else that's kind of vouching for them.
Right, right. And so we're still talking about that same stud athlete. They're putting in 20 points a game. They're getting 10 rebounds a game. Do grades matter for me at all since this person is so good coming over to the States?
Yeah, they do matter. I mean, unless it's not, I mean, in men's basketball it might be a little different if you're going to just be a one and done, but you've got to have a certain, you got to meet the requirements. You got to take your core classes. And then you have to maintain, I think it's a 2.2. It's not that hard to get a 2.2 just from player perspective, but I've seen it all, so I won't say anything. But yeah, if you're not doing your work in the classroom at Quinnipiac, you're not going to see the floor. So I can say that. I don't know about every other school, but if you're not getting the job done in the classroom, then it's going to be hard to be successful here.
Right, and there's some cultures like when I played for Manhattanville where grades are very important. And if you're not meeting a certain grade point, it might not be a 2.2. For all you know, your coach could be a 2.5, it could be a 3. Right. And if you're not meeting that, right, you're not playing, right? And we all have to remember, for the majority of us, we're using basketball as a vehicle to get us to where we need to go, whether that's to stay in basketball, whether we want to become a doctor or a lawyer, whatever it is, right? We've got to make sure that our grades are in line in order to
Yeah,
be
and
the best version of ourselves.
and almost every school at this point has resources, whether it's an academic advisor that works with the sports teams, or just maybe just women's basketball, and tutors, and you have enough resources to be able to get the job done, especially at the Division 1 level.
Do most schools have English second language centers as well? I mean, off the top, they do.
Mhm. Yes.
Okay,
Most of them
perfect.
do. Yeah. So we have like an entire tutoring center where you can, sit with people and they'll help you out and whatnot. And obviously it's definitely more challenging being an international student. There's no doubt about it. But a lot of the professors are very accommodating, and, we do our best to really take care of those international students. And a lot of them here have been, our higher GPA students just naturally coming over. My teammates, they were brilliant. Paula from Latvia was in mechanical engineering. And their work ethic is usually not a question. So
Right.
whether it comes to basketball or academics.
Right. Okay. So going off the topic of work ethic, what is some things that you can suggest for coaches, younger or older, doesn't matter, about continuing their education and continue to get better? What's some of the ways that you continue to get better every day, aside from practice and watching film? Is there any other ways that we can continue to get better?
Yeah, I mean, I guess this kind of goes with watching film, but to me, it's not even just watching film, it's clinics. Like, can you get to a clinic? And, obviously during COVID, there wasn't really many things going on in person. The amount of virtual clinics that I watched and I paid for, and I think you've got to be willing to, again, not everyone has the resources. Of course, I get that. But if you do, to, instead of spending that $20 going out to eat, spend that $20 on, the Coaches Summit Clinic, on listening to, Gino Oriemo or Billy Donovan, or, an NBA, someone else speak and teach the game. And I think that's really an investment, because a lot of those clinics on there's gold, whether they're drills, whether they're how to run a program, whether it's skill development. I mean, Phil Beckner and Cody Toppert are two of the guys that I really, really look at in terms of watching everything that they've put out. I've had, whether it be free or I've paid for it. And I think that that's money well invested, because again, that 3-2-1 simulation I was talking about earlier, that I got from Cody Toppert. And I've watched hours and hours of film of how he breaks down his actions in the same way that I was explaining before. And being able to apply that stuff to our program has been a game changer. So not just game film, but really spending the time. And it takes hours, right? I might sit in front of my computer for hours in the morning, just listening to someone speak and to teach. So to really be dialed in and willing to learn topics that you're maybe not as familiar with, and to really dive into one or two topics, as opposed to just trying to learn a million things at once, right? So if you're trying to get better at zone offense, dial in for a week on zone offense. Go get to buy 3 different clinics, or there's free clinics out there. Watch 3 different segments on zone offense and really dive into that, take notes, and then apply it to your team, instead of going one day on motion and the second day on dribble drive. And then you don't really kind of get a grasp on anything. So that's my biggest piece of advice, is kind of take it one thing at a time if possible, but you got to be willing to invest the time and the money if you have it.
That's awesome, because one of the things that I ask coaches all the time is, how do you get your players to buy in? And for me, one of the things that the easiest way to get buy-in is if players see that you are continuing to develop yourself for the good of them. It's very hard for a player to be disrespectful to someone who is trying to help them, even though it happens, right?
That's a good point.
But yeah, even though it happens. But getting buy-in, for the most part, to me, right, is letting them know that I care and I'm doing my part. I'm telling you guys to do all this stuff, and it's going to be hard. Like, as you know, Coach B is going to make you do some hard stuff. But after it's all said and done, you guys get to go back to the dorm. You don't know, Coach B is probably watching a seminar on how about periodization or nutrition or stuff like that
Right.
to get you guys ready for the next game, right? So that's one of the best ways. So thank you for talking about that,
Yes.
because that's one of the best ways to create buy-in with your player.
Yeah, and just going off that, like you've got to be excited about the workouts, right? Like just as much as they are. Like you can't be expect the players to be excited if you're like, they will ask you to work out and you're like, sure, like only 20 minutes. Like I gotta go. Like you've got to be the first one in there and excited about their development, because it's not about you at the end of the day. And that's where I think it comes down to also like, hey, what do you want to work on today? What do you think you need to get better at? Like, it's got to be a joint process.
Right, exactly. You have to be even more excited than them, because for the most part, development is hard, right? And they've got to put in some pain and sweat, and
it's not overnight. And that's what everyone expects. It's not overnight. So it's the ones that can really be consistent that end up seeing the biggest, take the biggest jump.
Absolutely. Well, Jen, you've been so generous with your time. Just one more question, and I just love your passion, and I can see that you're going to be a huge impact to anybody that you come in contact with. Last question for me would just be, let's say you've had a long, successful career, and it is well into the far future from now, and it's just been your last game, it's your last season. Looking back, what's the lasting change that you want to have on the basketball field as a whole and the people that you work with?
Oof, well, I'm so early in my career now. This is funny. I'm going to look back in like 10 years and be like, what the hell? But I think just the biggest thing that I've noticed, and I feel like that I can make a difference right now in my position as, the third assistant coach at Quinnipiac, is literally just the sweat equity piece and just getting players to love basketball. Like, that's what I just try to do. Is I absolutely loved it. Like going to play pickup was like my favorite thing in the world. So when people are like, oh my God, I don't want to play, I'm like, what? Like how, so getting kids, and you'd be surprised. Like, and not just obviously at our school, but at schools everywhere. It's like, is it just a way to get a scholarship, or do you love the game? Like, I want these kids to want to come to practice and want to compete every single day and want to go play pickup and play one-on-one after practice. Like, it can't just feel like a job. And I feel like that's kind of on me right now, is to like not make it feel like that, every day is not going to be fun in practice, right? Coach is getting after them, and, some days are going to be harder and you don't want to do certain drills. But at the end of the day, like, can we get the majority of our players, or can I get the majority of our players to love coming to practice every day, to love competing, to love getting extra workouts in? Like, how do you make that not feel like a job? And I'm still trying to figure that out. But I think if I can figure that out for the majority of players, it's not going to happen with everybody because not everyone loves it. But if I can figure out a way to make the majority of our players want to come to practice and want to keep coming back and want to keep getting extra workouts in, I think that that's huge, because the more that they're self-motivated, then they don't need me anymore to be like, hey, come work out today, right? And they start doing it on their own. And then one kid brings another kid in, and then two kids bring three kids in, and now half the team's in there before practice. And you're like, oh, wow, the whole team's already out there and they're playing pickup and they're having fun. Like, that to me is it probably would be an end goal of, if the majority of the players that I end up coaching end up loving basketball more than when they started.
Awesome. Well, I'm a big fan of your content. So can you tell people where they can find more about you and learn from you online?
Yeah, so I actually have a podcast. It's called Backyard Buckets Basketball. I've been in a little bit of a hiatus since the season's gotten going. I haven't been as consistent, but once we end, I'll be back at it. I just talk, I interview former players and coaches on there as well, and kind of get their perspective from more experienced coaches. Just because, again, I am only in year 2, so still learning a lot, and that's been a lot of fun. But Will, this has been awesome. I really love your podcast. I tuned into a couple episodes in the days leading up to this. So that's where people can find me. I'm on Twitter too. It's like Jen Faye QU or something like that. But yeah, so I appreciate it.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Just hold the line. Let me just end this. But awesome to have you on.